has helped us as people, just the human race, but then as a Christian, God helps us to have self-control. And if we lack that self-control, then we're very vulnerable to our propensities, our tendencies, and our weaknesses. So self-control is a very, very valuable thing. Now, in chapter 26, really through about verse 12, for the most part, it deals now with fools. As snow in summer and rain in harvest, so honor is not fitting for a fool. It usually doesn't snow in the summer, and it usually doesn't rain in the harvest. Those things don't go together. And it's not fitting for a person who is a fool to have honor. Just a statement. And then verse 2 is somewhat, doesn't quite fit this scheme of dealing with fools necessarily, but it says in verse 2, like a flitting sparrow, like a flying swallow, so a curse without cause shall not alight. Now, if you look at that verse and you think, when you see a sparrow flying around, they're not like seagulls, I guess it's seagulls. You see them, or geese or ducks, whatever, that are going somewhere. They're just going in a straight line. You see a little sparrow flying, they go this way, that way, up, down, this way, that way, or like a little hummingbird. My goodness, they're confused, I'm sure, but they're not. And when you see a swallow flying, you're not sure, is a swallow going to go north, south, east, west? You don't know where they're going to go. In other words, there's no real destination in mind. It's kind of confusing on the surface. And in the same way, a curse without a cause shall not alight. So when someone curses you, they threaten you, and they say, they curse at you, they issue some kind of a curse at you, and you're gonna fail. You be cursed and blah, blah, blah. And there's no real cause there. In other words, they don't need to be saying that to you. There's no justification for that kind of a thing. Then don't worry about it. It's like a bird flying. You don't even know where it doesn't even know where it's going to go. That's the simple point. Going on, and so in that sense, a foolish person does issue those curses without causes. The best thing for a fool like that is don't even pay any attention to them. Easier said than done, but it's going to be addressed again. A whip for the horse, a bridle for the donkey, and a rod for the fool's back. So horses are whipped. Donkeys have a bridle and a bit put in their mouth to steer them. They have to have this external pressure. And in the same way, a rod is for the fool's back. That's what happens to a fool. They suffer greatly. Do not answer a fool according to his folly, lest you also be like him. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. Now, these verses complement one another. They're not contradictory. And in the first point, it's unwise to argue with a fool at his level and to just even recognize the foolish things that he's saying. It's just unwise. When somebody is speaking to you and they're just an absolute fool, it's best to not even answer them back. Just leave them alone. As much as you might want to try to straighten them out or to offer them a truthful perspective or some wisdom, just leave them alone. But then it says in verse 5, answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. So there is a time when you should speak to a fool, and you ought to set him straight so that he doesn't just keep going on in his foolishness. He who sends a message by the hand of a fool cuts off his own feet and drinks violence. A foolish messenger is going to he's going to disable the sender so that the purpose can't be accomplished. Let's read it again. He who sends a message by the hand of a fool cuts off his own feet. It's just not going to work. And he drinks violence. It's just not going to work out. Like the legs of the lame that hang limp is a proverb in the mouth of fools, or it's useless. You take a foolish person and they're trying to say something wise. It's just, it's not going to work out. Like one who binds a stone in a sling. Now, when you stop and think about it, a stone in a sling should not be tied into the sling. It should be put in the sling so that it can be shot out. Is he who gives honor to a fool. It's the wrong thing. You don't take a stone and put it in a sling and then cover it over. It's just not going to go. It's supposed to go. And if you give honor to a fool, it's just you're doing something that isn't right. It's not meant to be that way. Fools are not to be honored. Like a thorn that goes into the hand of a drunkard is a proverb in the mouth of fools. Now, the thorn going into the hand of a drunkard, he wouldn't or she would not even feel that thorn going in there because they just don't have the ability. Same thing with a proverb in the mouth of fools. It just doesn't even register. The great God who formed all things gives the fool his hire and the transgressor his wages. God is the one who has created everything. And what's going to happen to the fool and the transgressor is that they're going to really reap what they have sown. In that culture, when you shot an arrow, if you were an archer, you could shoot your arrows and you could hurt all of the people around you. And if you hire a fool, or you hire just somebody that's walking by, what's going to happen is it's going to bring trouble. So the great God who formed all things gives the fool his hire and the transgressor his wages. A little bit of a difficult verse to translate. Verse 11 is not your best after-dinner kind of thought. As a dog returns to his vomit, his own vomit, this, if you know the process of what happens, how a dog will eat things they shouldn't eat, and then they'll go throw them up, and then they go back and eat what they've thrown up. So a fool repeats his folly. Serious statements. Do you see a man wise in his own eyes? Now, this particular verse is that there's only one thing worse than a fool, and that's a person who thinks more of themselves than they should. Do you see a man wise in his own eyes? There's more hope for a fool than for him. A person who thinks more of themselves than they should, they think they're greater than they really are. A fool has more potential than that person. And then dealing with lazy people in verse 13, the slothful man says, there is a lion in the road, a fierce lion in the streets. So lazy people make up every reason in the world why they can't go out to work. I mean, imagine in that rustic culture saying, well, I can't go out and farm today because I saw a mountain lion out there. Lazy people will make up reasons why they shouldn't go to work. As a door turns on its hinges, it creaks. So does the slothful man on his bed. He's just lazy and he turns over. That is, unless he has a Tempur-Pedic bed, and then you wouldn't have any, just a little lightheartedness in the midst of all this heavy stuff in Proverbs. The slothful man buries his hand in the bowl. It wearies him to bring it back to his mouth. This has already been covered in a chapter or two back, but when a person gets so lazy that they can't even lift their food up from the, they can't. It's just a statement. In verse 16, the sluggard or the lazy person is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who can answer sensibly. Lazy people have a way of getting out of work. And they after a while, they just think, I'm pretty smart. I've figured out how to work the system. I've figured out how to game people. They're actually smarter than 7 other wise people. They can become so smart at being lazy. And then concerning gossips, beginning in verse 17. He who passes by and meddles in a quarrel not his own is like one who takes a dog by the ears. So there's the wisdom here of when you're going along in your life and somebody's having a problem, don't meddle with that problem. Don't get involved in that problem. And if you do, you're going to have a lot of trouble. Just like if you took a dog and took both of its ears together and picked that dog up by its ears, that dog's going to scratch and howl and bite. It's not going to be very pleasant. So we're not to meddle in other people's business. And so it's a great thing when we think in our own minds, that's not my business. I always appreciate it when I'm talking with somebody about something and they say, well, not only do I not need to know about those details, I don't even want to hear about them. And I always say, well, I'm going to tell you anyways. No, I don't. But I always appreciate that. I don't need to know about it. Why? It's not my business. And I don't want to know about it. It's not my business. Otherwise, I'm meddling. I'm getting involved in something that isn't my business. Boy, the world is full of this today. Like a madman who throws firebrands, if you can imagine a person taking burning sticks and such and just throwing them around, like a man who throws firebrands and arrows and death, is the man who deceives his neighbor and says, I was only joking. So the person who is thoughtless is a dangerous person to be around, especially a person who's thoughtless and then they just make a joke about it after they've been so thoughtless. And their thoughtlessness has caused all kinds of trouble, but from their perspective, it's no big deal. Oh, no, it is a big deal. You've caused a lot of trouble by not being very thoughtful. Where there is no wood, the fire goes out. And where there is no talebearer or gossip or slanderer or whisper, strife ceases. So if you don't put any wood on the campfire, it's going to go out. After a little bit, and we've all been around campfires that are blazing at night, and then you wake up in the morning and there's no fire. It's just a little bit of smoke, maybe some coals down in there. Or you've been around a fire where you keep putting wood on it. So the same thing, if somebody stops gossiping, if somebody stops striving, if somebody stops slandering, if somebody stops whispering about something, guess what will happen? It'll just go away. So just to leave it alone. As charcoal is to burning coals and wood to fire, they ignite. So is a contentious man to kindle strife. Oh, you're looking for a fight. The kind of person that they're just contentious. They're going to ignite something, a contentious person. They're the troublemaker. They're going to cause a problem. The words of a talebearer or a gossip are like tasty trifles or wounds. And they go down into the inmost or the rooms of your belly. They go down into the depths of your heart. When somebody is gossiping about you, it hurts you deeply. It goes deep, 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 deep inside of you. It hurts tremendously. And that's why the Bible says we shouldn't be gossiping. We shouldn't do